Good evening.
Oh, hi. Oh, what a lovely-looking pair.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
The Carry On series stands as one of the most enduring and beloved chapters in British cinematic history. Spanning over 3 decades and featuring 31 films released between 1958 and 92, along with television spin-offs and stage adaptations, the franchise struck a remarkable chord in the hearts of post-war audiences. The history of Carry On.
By it.
The origins of Carry On trace back to 1958, when the first film, Carry On Sergeant, introduced a playful send-up of the British Army. Creator Peter Rogers and director Gerald Thomas set out with no illusions of grandeur, tight budgets, rapid filming, minimal retakes. And yet, out of that scrappy environment came magic. Audiences responded. They loved the sight of ordinary characters thrown into absurd situations, the sly jabs at social institutions, the sense of willing silliness. Early entries like Carry On Nurse, Carry On Teacher, Carry On Sergeant, and especially Carry On Cleo kicked things up a gear. Carry On Cleo demonstrated how the series could expand its comedic canvas, borrowing the grand sets destined for more lavish productions, but subverting them for small-budget parody. Within those sets, the main players, Sid James, Kenneth Williams, Joan Sims, Charles Hawtrey, Hattie Jack, Bernard Bresslaw, Kenneth Connor, Terry Scott, and Jim Dale, found characters they could imprint upon, creating archetypes audiences welcomed with open arms. These actors became cultural linchpins. Kenneth Williams expressed eccentricity and camp in ways Broadway would later echo. Sid James offered roguish charisma and sly humor, the British answer to the American fast talker. Joan Sims grounded the comedy with warmth and wit, while Charles Hawtrey, a diminutive figure, exuded charm in his fussy way. Jim Dale brought energy and musicality, elevating routines with his theatrical flair. Barbara Windsor joined in later, her saucy persona symbolizing the cheek that kept the series irrepressibly fresh. Their collective timing, familiarity, and chemistry were central to the franchise's popularity. Cinemagoers came for the setup, but stayed for the comfort of seeing favorites once again, navigating ridiculous situations with gleeful commitment. By the late 60s, the franchise remained as popular as ever. Jim Dale, involved in 11 to 12 early films, became one of the central figures of this success, bringing a fresh dynamism and versatility that audiences appreciated. His ability to sing, dance, and perform a wide range of characters gave certain entries a dramatic edge and made them stand out. When he left the series around 1970, pursuing roles at the Old Vic and Theatre Works, most notably alongside Laurence Olivier, it created a tangible shift. That departure wasn't celebrated by everyone. Some long-standing cast members saw his move as pretentious, a bid to become, quote, too good for the series. There were hushed accusations that Jim Dale considered himself above the cheeky, lowbrow appeal of Carry On, that he was abandoning a much-loved ensemble in favor of high culture. Behind the jovial exteriors, bitterness began to stir. The gap left by his exit was felt by both the creative team and viewers. His theatrical flair could have added new texture to a franchise sometimes accused of resting on its laurels, and without him, the dynamic shifted. Part of what fueled on-screen charm was also the off-screen relationships. Complicated, affectionate, often prickly. Kenneth Williams, so central to the franchise's tone, harbored tensions with many colleagues. He filled thick diaries with complaints about low budgets, poor pay, and petty rivalries. He adored making audiences laugh, but he resented the stinginess of the production. Rogers, known for being tight-fisted, famously, quote, would do anything for my actors except pay them. Actors like Williams and Charles Hawtrey felt underpaid, even exploited. As Williams became a lightning rod for criticisms of the keep costs down ethos, his comments could sting, even as he prided himself on his comedic skill. Amid these power plays and personality clashes emerged a memorable feud, the tension between Kenneth Williams and Elizabeth Knight. Knight, who appeared only once in the series, in Carry On Again, Doctor in 1969, became, in Williams' eyes, an outsider who didn't quite belong. He perceived her as standoffish and allegedly dismissive, none of the expected deference toward Williams, who saw himself as a cornerstone of the series. And yet, public love never wavered. The franchised familiarity was part of its genius. Audiences didn't mind if everything looked the same or if plots felt recycled. They came to see favorite faces treating a new scenario with familiar banter. Kenneth Williams' impersonations, Sid James' caddish grins, Joan Sims' exasperation, Charles Hawtrey's frou-frou routines, These signatures remained dependable sources of delight. The films were comic comfort food. Even when they admittedly slipped into cruder territory, nostalgia and affection kept fans invested. Academics and critics have debated the legacy from different vantage points. On one hand, Carry On captured mid-20th century British attitudes, class anxieties, sexual taboos, deference to authority, with a breezy cheekiness. Its subjects were antiquated, its institutions ripe for parody. On the other hand, critics pointed out that the series, collected now under a more scrutinizing lens, contained dated stereotypes and narrow to non-existent representation of race or gender. Still, fans argue that the humor was rooted in innocence rather than malice, a quality they believe today's politically correct culture often misunderstands. Whatever the judgment, there's no denying Carry On shaped the comedic landscape. Later sitcoms and sketch shows borrowed its irreverent rhythm. America's Airplane and Naked Gun owe a debt to the Carry On blueprint of spoof and farce. Behind all that, the performers remained human. Jim Dale's leaving catalyzed both sorrow and schadenfreude. It raised questions. Was the series a cooperative comedy community or a harsh meritocracy where talent meant exclusion? Dale's ambition for the theater catalog was met with icy stares, and for a while his career gained a theatrical sheen, while the Carry On cast carried on in short film skits that felt like cheap reruns of Gold Rush laugh tracks. Meanwhile, Kenneth Williams, whose diaries became a literary phenomenon after his death, continued to take low pay but boasted of his artistry. He relished being the talent amidst the thrift. At the same time, he nodded with anxiety to rivals like Dale and Windsor. His feud with Elizabeth Knight lingered as a footnote, but it broadcast a deeper truth, that the Carry On series, despite promoting itself as a troupe, functioned like any workplace, filled with alliances, rivalries, hierarchies, cliques, and bruised egos. And yet, that tension helped fuel the magic. Internal friction between strong personalities sometimes translates to electricity on the screen. Writers and producers needed to coax something fresh for audiences, and that edge often came from actors who both liked each other and wanted the best lines themselves. That tension brought a sharpness to the satire and physicality that wouldn't have existed in a collection of bland team players. Keep carrying on.
I learnt my trade in the Carry On films, watching and listening and being part of the Carry On team.
The legacy of Carry On is therefore double-edged. On the one hand, it produced unrelenting comedy on the cheap. It brought belly laughs to generations. It became shorthand for British comic tradition. But on the other, it was a crucible, one that exposed low pay, fractured relationships, fragile egos, and fragile camaraderie. The idea that these cheeky players parted company in private, held grudges, whispered criticisms, excluded colleagues, and questioned each other's motives reminds us that no comedic miracle happens in a vacuum. The laughter was the output, the friction was the input. The series may have been called Carry On, but the cast didn't always carry on together in harmony. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think the Carry On films are still funny and hold up today? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.